Hello and welcome to Washington State Native Bee Society. Tonight we have Chanda Bartholomew, who works with the Washington State Department of Ag, and finally we get to hear about the bees of Washington State, the work that she spent so much time on to give us our historical records. Chanda.
Thank you for inviting me to give this talk. Today, I'm going to talk about the Washington Bee Checklist, which I collaborated with Elizabeth Murray, Silas Bossert, Joel Gardner, and Chris Looney to create. I know many of you already know all this, but here's just a brief overview on bees. There are over 20,000 species of bees worldwide, with more than 4,000 in North America. Regions of the world with the highest bee species richness tend to be warm, temperate, xeric regions. For example, the deserts of the southwestern United States. In fact, 75% of North America's bee species can be found in the western United States. Bees have evolved to specialize on pollen and nectar. This reliance on plants makes them vital components of global ecosystems as pollinators. However, this same reliance on plants make them susceptible to habitat loss and other anthropogenic factors. Unsurprisingly, loss of host plants, nesting sites, and/or nesting materials impact their survival. Unfortunately, we know little to nothing about the specific nesting and floral preferences of most bee species. Washington is an ecologically diverse state. The EPA has characterized the United States into ecoregions at 4 different levels, with level 1 being more generalized and level 4 being more specific. This map shows both levels 3 and 4, with the different colors representing levels 3. At level 3, Washington has 9 ecoregions. I want to specifically point out the Columbia Plateau ecoregion, which comprises most of the area east of the Cascade Mountains. The Columbia Plateau is really similar to other ecoregions around the world known for high bee species richness. The Columbia Plateau also contains the Palouse Prairie, a critically endangered ecosystem that supports many rare and endangered species, despite being reduced to little more than 1% of its historic range. How does one go about building a checklist? For the Washington State checklist, I started by downloading data from online databases. Once I had all those records, I think there were more than 60,000 at one point. I had to clean it up a bit. That involved going through them all to remove duplicate records and anything not identified to species. Next, I deep dived the literature. While some older records have been added to online databases as museums have been digitizing their collections, many still are not. While I was searching the literature, I was also looking for any taxonomic changes. I was recently asked how I kept track of it all. What ended up working for me was creating a list in Word with all the species listed by family, where I kept my notes as I worked. It was a way for me to systematically keep track of what I had already researched and what I still needed to dig deeper on. From start to finish, this checklist took about 3 years to complete. There were a few challenges I encountered during this process. I think the biggest challenge was the taxonomic changes. I was still working on this step right up to submitting it to the journal, and the taxonomy has already changed for one of the species. I'll highlight that one later. As our knowledge of taxonomy changes, species end up synonymized or separated. That required tracking each species to make sure there weren't multiple entries for the same species, or a species hiding in records with another species. Because there were so many records, sorting out duplicates was time-consuming. And verifying records was challenging because I couldn't just go look at the specimens. That's why the checklist has a questionable records section. The records do exist, but we could just not verify their validity with the resources available to us. The final challenge on this list here was probably the most frustrating: locating and actually accessing the literature. The main source of records came from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, GBIF, and the Discover Life Global Mapper. These two sources combined included records from digitized museum collections, iNaturalist, Bumblebee Watch, Bug Guide, and BOLD, the Barcode of Life data system. Additional data came from private and institutional collections, as well as records from the literature review. Before I get into these results, I'd like to remind you these numbers are based on the historical records. These have not been adjusted to include anything that has been published in the last year since the checklist was published, nor do they include data from the Washington Bee Atlas. Overall, we were able to confirm the presence of 565 species in Washington. These species represent all 6 of the bee families known to occur in North America. Of these, Andrena was the most species-rich genus, comprising 20% of the total species. A total of 17 species were found to be introduced from other parts of the world. Based on distribution, an additional 102 species are likely to occur in Washington. Records from an additional 38 species were found. However, as Washington is outside the known distribution for many of these species, more research is needed to confirm their presence in Washington. These records are not included as part of the data I'm going to present here. It is possible these records are misidentifications or were mislabeled. Specific nesting and floral preferences for most bees is lacking. For many, this data is presumed based on data for other species in the genus or family, but even that is limited because some families or genera can be variable in their preferences. Based on the limited known or presumed ecological data available, Washington's bee fauna are predominantly solitary generalist ground nesting species. Notable Washington solitary bees are the cavity nesting mason bees, Osmia aglea, Osmia atraventris, and Osmia lignaria. These bees are important raspberry pollinators. These figures show the seasonality of the species by family. The top figure shows the seasonality statewide. The bottom 2 figures break it down geographically, with the one on the left showing the seasonality for the east of the Cascades and the figure on the right showing the seasonality for the west of the Cascades. Peak of bee activity statewide is between April and September, with some species active throughout the year. When comparing the west side with the east side, Andrenidae has a higher peak in the spring on the west side, indicating that the west side has more species of spring-flying Andrenidae. These maps show the locations of all the records with GPS coordinates. The map on the left shows them by family. These records exclude the bumblebee and honeybee records to make it more readable. The map on the right shows the bumblebee and honeybee records excluded from the other map. These maps show how unevenly the state has been sampled. Places like the Seattle metro area have a higher density of records than more rural areas like Lincoln County. Even for bumblebees, which have been targeted by projects such as Bumblebee Watch and the Bumblebee Atlas, there are still some areas that are missing points. Here's that same data from both maps combined. This map looks at the number of species by county. Once again, it shows that many areas of the state are undersampled. Counties with the higher species richness are locations of Washington's larger cities, as well as popular recreational areas and areas of targeted bee biodiversity research. Unsurprisingly, Whitman County, home to Washington State University, has the highest species richness. This is likely due to the presence of the university for research and not that Whitman County has a lot more bees than the rest of the state. As expected, the Columbia Plateau ecoregion has the highest species richness of all the ecoregions in Washington. Additionally, 9 of the 44 total genera occurring in Washington have only been documented east of the Cascade Mountains. This map shows where these records are located. This is likely due to its similarity to other ecoregions around the world known for high bee species richness. This could also be the reason why there are no genera recorded from only the west side of the Cascade Mountains. While it is possible some of these genera may be discovered on the west side in the future, some genera may indeed be restricted to the east side. Zacosmia is a genus of kleptoparasites whose hosts are only associated with xeric or semi-xeric habitats. 84 species have not been recorded in Washington since before 1970. More than 80% of these species are from eastern Washington. More than 25% of them are kleptoparasites, with nearly half of these kleptoparasites from the genus Nomata. One of these 84 species is this bee pictured here. This is Macropus stereonematus opaca. At the time the checklist was published, it was the only record for the family Melididae in Washington. However, Macropus nuda has since been documented in Spokane County. This particular bee pictured here is the only record of this subspecies in the world. It was collected at Morgan's Ferry along the Yakima River in 1882. The genus Macropus is unique in that its members collect oils from Lysomachia for nest construction and to provision their nests. Of the 565 species documented in Washington, only 158 species have been assigned a conservation status. Of these, 42 are considered vulnerable, imperiled, or critically imperiled or endangered. Of these 42 species, 6 have not been documented in the state in more than 50 years. Currently, only 3 bee species have been identified as species of greatest conservation need by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife in their State Wildlife Action Plan. These 3 species are the bumblebees Bombus morrisoni, Bombus occidentalis, and Bombus sucklei. Historically, Washington has 565 documented species with an estimated total near 700. Many areas of the state are undersampled. Additionally, many species are missing key ecological data. However, since the checklist has been published, new data has been published. I already mentioned the finding of a new state record of Macropus. There has also been a study published documenting 8 additional state records as well as 100 county records for Chelan County. Additionally, the Washington Bee Atlas volunteers have been really busy cataloging the state's bee fauna. I don't have this data, but I believe there are already state records coming out of that. I know you all love to start the meetings with a bee share, so I thought I'd end this talk with a bee share of my own. Washington has so many fascinating species. I'm going to highlight some of them here. I'm going to start with the Andrenidae. This is one of the larger bee families and is found on all continents except Australia. These are solitary ground nesting species, including both generalist and specialist species. Washington has 4 documented genera, with Andrena being the most speciose. On this slide, as well as the subsequent slides, the map shows where that particular taxa, in this case the Andrenidae, has been documented, and the figure shows its documented phenology. This is Andrena nivalis. This species is a solitary generalist species that has been noted to keep its nests well separated from other nests. It has been observed nesting in the ground in a dense grassy strip with entrances near the bases of vegetation, as well as in bare soil. This is a spring-flying species and can be found on both the east and west sides of the state. Andrena prunorum is also a solitary generalist species, noted to keep its nest well separated from other nests. It has been observed nesting in a lawn and a vacant lot in parts of western Washington. Recognizable by its orange legs, it can be found flying throughout the summer. Heliopsis personata is a solitary ground nesting species that has been observed nesting in Nomia melanderi bee beds. Its pollen preferences are unknown. It flies from May until July and has only been collected from the eastern part of the state. Oreopisides venduzii has been documented as a known kleptoparasite of this species. Another of the larger bee families is the Apidae. The majority of kleptoparasitic bee species in North America can be found in this family. This family also includes the well-known honeybees, bumblebees, and carpenter bees. Members of this family have varied nesting and floral preferences. Anthophora bomboides is a solitary generalist species. However, it nests in aggregations. In fact, an unusually large nesting aggregation has been documented on Waldron Island in San Juan County. This bee prefers to nest in areas of steep, exposed soil such as coastal bluffs. Its seasonality shows it to fly in May and June. Anthophora crotchii is a generalist solitary ground nesting species. that is out in the spring. It has only been recorded east of the Cascade Mountains. It has a conservation status of vulnerable globally. Bombus occidentalis is a eusocial species. Its nests in the Pacific Northwest have been documented to produce over 1,000 workers, males, and queens over a season. These nests can be found in cavities in the ground or in logs. Like other bumblebee species, Bombus occidentalis is a generalist. Bombus occidentalis is considered a vulnerable species globally and imperiled in Washington. It is one of the 3 species listed as species of greatest conservation need. Bombus caliginosus is another generalist bumblebee. It is also eusocial and it nests in cavities in the ground as well as above ground cavities. Nests have also been found in insulation under houses. Bombus caliginosus is considered imperiled globally and vulnerable in Washington. It is not considered a species of greatest conservation need currently. This bee is Bombus vosnenskii. It is also a eusocial generalist. Like Bombus occidentalis, bee vosnenskii colonies have been documented to produce over 1,000 workers, males, and queens over a season, with nests and cavities in the ground as well as above ground under buildings. It is considered secure globally and in Washington, meaning there are no conservation concerns for this species. I know many of you are aware of how similar these 2 species are to each other, so I thought I'd show you a side-by-side comparison. Bombus caliginosus, the bee on the left, has been assessed to have conservation concerns, while Bombus vosnenskii has been assessed to have none. Here's how I tell them apart. Bombus caliginosus tends to look shaggier, like it needs a haircut, when compared to Bombus vosnenskii. Bombus caliginosus also has a longer cheek. That's the area I have circled in white. It is the part of the face between the bottom of the compound eye and the top of the mandible. Some refer to this as having a longer or shorter face. Another characteristic that isn't easy to see in these photos is the presence or absence of yellow hairs on the underside of the abdomen. Bombus caliginosus females will have yellow hairs on the underside of the abdomen opposite the yellow stripe. You can kind of see it in this photo, but it's not the right angle to see it definitively. Ceratina nanula is another solitary generalist species. These bees will excavate their nests in stems where the pith is exposed. After the female has completed the nest, she will guard the nest entrance while her offspring develop. Ceratina nanula is active from April through September. Diadasia nitidifrons is a solitary ground nesting species that is a specialist on Malvaceae. It has only been recorded east of the Cascade Mountains. The last record documented in the checklist was in 1919, so it looks like it has been rediscovered. Nomada are kleptoparasites. The main hosts for Nomada are species of Andrena, but they have also been documented from the nests of Calides, Agapostemon, Lasioglossum, Halictus, and Eucera. Xylocopa virginica is a recently introduced species. It is from the eastern part of North America. It is a carpenter bee known to nest in structural wood. It is a generalist and can be either solitary or social. Only 2 genera of Calididae are found in Washington, Calides and Hyleus. Both genera are solitary with both specialist and generalist species. What makes the Calididae unique is that the females will line their nest cells with cellophane and their nest provisions are liquid. This bee is a Calides species. Species of Calides excavate their nests in the ground. Hyleus build their nests in dead plant stems. Hyleus species store pollen and nectar in an interior crop instead of an exterior scopa like other bee species. This lack of an exterior scopa gives them a more wasp-like appearance. The sweat bees in the family Halictidae are widespread and abundant. Halictids are varied in their nesting and floral preferences, and they also display a variety of social habits from solitary to eusocial. Washington has 6 documented genera of Halictidae. This bee is Agapostemon subtilior, and I alluded to it earlier when I talked about taxonomy changes. A paper published just prior to the publication of the checklist cleared up the confusion in taxonomy with this group of Agapostemon. As a result of timing, this bee appears in the checklist as Agapostemon angelicus texanus. This is a solitary ground nesting species that is a generalist and is active throughout the season. Halictus rubicundus is a generalist that nests in the ground in primarily bare, sandy loam soil. They nest in aggregations and can be either solitary or eusocial. They are also active throughout the season. A distinguishing character of the genus Halictus is hair bands on the apical edge of each abdominal terga. Lasioglossum is the largest genus in the world, and the subgenus Dialectus is the most common. There are over 300 species in North America north of Mexico. These tiny metallic bees are difficult to identify as species and have been called morphologically monotonous. While the ecological data for most of these species is lacking, the known data shows this genus to be varied in its nesting and floral preferences, as well as its sociality. In Washington, these bees are active throughout the season. A notable Washington solitary ground nesting species is one of my favorites, Nomia melinderi, and the alkali bee. These bees are known as the only managed solitary ground nesting bee species in the world and are important alfalfa pollinators. They tend to nest in aggregations. This tendency has made it so nesting sites near alfalfa fields can be maintained and protected. The managed nesting beds consisting of moist, silty, and periodically salted soils can be found in Walla Walla County. The Megachilidae are the leafcutter, mason, carder, and resin bees. They are identifiable by having the scopa on the underside of the abdomen. They have varied nesting preferences, but have a propensity to nest in wood, which makes it easier for them to be transported from place to place. As a result, a lot of invasive species are from this family. The Megachilidae also have varied floral preferences. Anthidium manicatum is an introduced species. This species is native to Europe, Western Asia, and Northern Africa. It is a solitary generalist species that nests in cavities. It is called a wool carder because it collects plant hairs to line its nest cells. Males have been noted to be aggressively territorial. They are known to attack other bees that get on their flowers. They are most active in Washington between June and August. Coleoxys are kleptoparasites whose main hosts are Megachilidae. They are the most diverse kleptoparasitic genus. They are most active in Washington from June through August. Megachile paraherta is a generalist solitary ground nesting species. Nests have been documented in a vacant lot in Kitsap County. Like other leafcutter bees, Megachile paraherta uses leaves as part of its nest cell construction. It is most active in Washington from June to September, and its nests are parasitized by Coleoxys rufitarsis. Last but not least is Osmia lignaria, the blue orchard bee. Well known as a commercial orchard pollinator, this is a generalist solitary cavity nesting species. When not using artificial nesting boxes, they nest in wood or pithy stems using mud and clay to partition nest cells. This is a more spring-flying species that is most active in Washington in April and May. With that, I will leave it open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. They can't ask questions though.
They can't ask.
This document is final and it doesn't get updated. So we work with new things from here as this is the baseline, right? Something like that.
So it is the baseline. It's basically all the historical documents to create a baseline, and that's what we know is here and what we need to look at. As far as updating, at some point, yeah, we're gonna have to publish an updated checklist of things because we've got autumn's paper that's come out that's updated. We've got the new Macropus Nuda documented. So list is no longer actually up to date as to what's here in the state.
So this is going to grow
It is going to grow.
a lot. And but this is like the beginning level. Okay.
You
All
kind of have
right.
to start somewhere, and that's where this is just starting somewhere. This is what we know is here. And we know that we've got all these gaps that we need to fill in and figure out what we're missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the parts where we have lots of agriculture, it's too bad those weren't checked before they got plowed up.
Yeah, well, it was interesting when I was reading when I was doing the checklist. I was reading about that whole eastern part of the state, and there's a paper that someone that did the ecology was trying to study it, and when he went out there to study it, he realized that it had already been too late by the time he went out there to
Mm.
see what was historically there, that it was already mostly become turned over to farmland. And I think that was published back in the 70s or something. So even back then, it was already too late.
Yeah, because my ancestors homesteaded at the turn of the century. So all that wheat. Yeah, wow. I wonder if 700 is a small number. I hope so.
Yeah, I don't know. I have got pulled onto some other stuff, so I don't know. Um,
So what do
but
you do now?
well, I've been pulled on some other projects because we have a bunch of other things going on in the lab. I've been working on a lot of bee bycatch stuff, find the bees from that, and just other different projects in the lab.
So bycatch would be other kinds of pollinators like flies and wasps.
No, bycatch where we have like traps that are out in the field for target agricultural pests. The
Okay.
bees themselves are the bycatch. So I did the
Oh,
bee traps.
backwards. Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
I saw a trap by Cheney and I took a picture of what was in the bag that I could see, but you really couldn't tell other than it was a bumblebee. It was about as much as you could get. And I was really wondering who was picking that up because it looked like it needed to be changed.
Oh, is that the one you posted on iNaturalist?
Probably, yeah.
It looked like there was a Japanese beetle that you posted on iNaturalist.
Oh,
Japanese beetle trap. And yeah, those have been all pulled in now.
if we look at the records by county, it'd be neat to get people in those smaller count or less counted counties to join the bee atlas, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, I know like Wahkiakum County had the least amount of bee species that recorded from it. And we're missing like some large groups. Like I don't, if I remember correctly, lazy glossum are not have not been collected in Wahkiakum County, and
Wow.
they definitely should be there. So definitely under collected in out there.
Yeah, when you were talking about species diversity, I think that the Okanagan County has quite a few. It didn't come out the way that the divisions were by ecoregion, but they've got the North Cascades, they've got the Okanagan River riparian area, and they've got the sage
Mhm.
steppe. And they've been collected more. The same Mohican area has been studied a bunch.
Well, there was
I
a study in Okanagan County that they looked at the bees in Okanagan County. That's actually all those records are included in the checklist.
Yeah, I think that the Tri Cities and the basin should be able to give them a run for their money, but we just have to get more. It's hard to sample out there because there's so many farms.
Yeah, but that's probably where we need it the most is because that's probably where the bulk of our diversity is in that area.
Yeah. Megachilids are all over the place. That was the one with the most on the map, wasn't it? It seemed like they had the highest numbers of dots.
There were a lot of megacylids, yeah. I can't remember the
Easier for people
exact.
to see, maybe? That's the first bee I learned when I learned bees that weren't bumblebees.
I don't
Because
know.
people think the little ones are ants.
Or
Yeah.
you have ones that people don't realize are actually bees, but they're and not wasps.
And not wasps. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that you made it open source so that everybody can get to it.
Oh yeah, the that was done on purpose by design. We wanted the checklist to be used and by anybody that needed it. So yeah.
I know a good question. How
Okay.
did you deal with the INAT records? iNaturalist.
What do you mean? Like,
Well, they're in GBIF. You said you had an iNaturalist was on the slide. So did you use
okay,
any of
so
their pictures for some of them or not? Or did you just exclude those for now?
okay, so what I did was I pulled all the data out of GBIF and and then I went through so not all iNaturalist records end up in GBIF. This is something I discovered when I was like looking through what came up through iNaturalist and realizing that some of my B records were not there. And so I tried to figure out why my B records were not coming through iNaturalist
Mm-hmm.
to GBIF. And I tend to lock down my privacy settings on things. And so if you don't have your, I can't remember what levels you have on your permissions on your
Mm-hmm.
photos in iNaturalist, but the most restrictive ones do not, those records do not upload into GBIF.
So if
So,
someone was trying to protect a bee, they're actually keeping it from being researched.
right. Or if
That's
you,
interesting.
yeah, if you're trying to kind of like, yeah, um, I tend to lock down on my pictures and stuff. So I
Yeah.
have restrictions on them. So I've had to loosen that up so those records can go to GBIF. So that was something I found out. But once I had the records pulled out of GBIF, and then I had to go through. I actually went through each record individually in iNaturalist.
Wow.
I because what GBIF will give you the link, so you can go click the link and go back into iNaturalist and pull up the record. So I could look at the picture and look at the identification history to kind of vet the record to see if it's a good identification or not.
Yeah, because we were just kind of beginning to do that when you were doing your work. So a lot of them weren't identified yet. We have thousands and thousands now.
Yeah,
But we've
and I
got better
actually,
identifiers too. So,
yeah, that's when I started going in identifying an iNaturalist because then I would come up with things like flies that were identified as honeybees, and I'm like, wait, that's not right. So I go in there and I
mhm.
correct it while I was doing the vetting.
Thank you for that. Yeah, our project has really taken off, and I'm so happy we have experts helping to identify them. And now we have the bee atlas, so we can compare the pictures to the bees and see how far we can get with that. Karen assures me that there are some that will never be able to do it. That's okay. I I was happy that we got past 300. I haven't checked to see if they all belong in Washington. I started at the bottom and there was a nomada that was definitely not here, not
Hmm.
from here. I mean, the name was not from the West at all. So I asked them to change it, and then I went backwards, and the next three rows were all newbies that a lot of people are putting up their pin bees with lots of angles, and Karen identified this, so
Yeah.
they have both of the pictures and the actual identification has been done under a microscope, which
Yeah.
will. But we have to have 100 pictures like that before the AI called the CV in this system, the computer vision, can learn anything new.
Hmm.
So we have to find 100 of each of those bees.
Wow. That's going to be hard with the rarer ones.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But I've been liking how people have been going in there with all those microscope images like Carla's been doing and
Mhm.
really kind of I've been using that when I do my identifications because it's good to have something that's already been identified right there with the picture so I can compare what the
Mhm.
key has with what this bee that's already identified. It's kind of like another resource.
Yeah, I think it's our goal now to try to make better pictures in the keys too that
Yeah.
we have that are local. Because for Don, he had specimens from Utah, and their bees are completely different colors, and so you got to know what the actual character is that changes
Mhm.
changes the bee to something else that has nothing to do with what it looks like on the outside.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, this is gonna get hard really quickly.
Yeah. And some of those characters, the way they're written, it's like you're looking at a key. I'm like, what does that mean? So, yeah, having those pictures that are on, people have been posting on a naturalist is like, oh, is that what they mean by that description?
Hmm. The bglossary.org that David Kappert did, there's a YouTube about that.
Yeah.
And any words that you come up with, I can send them to him and he will add them to the glossary, or you can send them in yourself.
Oh,
Yeah,
I might have to make a list because there are a
please
few
do.
things I'm still having some trouble with, but his pictures are amazing and they have been helpful.
Yeah. He really liked Andrina and he wants to do Osmia. Karen said that there's a lot of them she can't get through yet, so we can only go so far with that. But he's open to any bee. So yeah, the problem is I think that each family has its own words that don't
Yeah.
translate to the other families when they both mean the same thing on or the same place on the bee. They just got different names somehow.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah, they're not just with bees, you run into that with all the different insect taxa. It's like when I pull out a key to work on like a beetle or something, I'm like, okay, what is that?
Hmm.
I have copies of different glossaries, entomology glossaries, just to try to track back track it back.
Yeah, and you have to go back in the literature and start with the beginning and work your way clear through to modern times sometimes, I suppose, to track how they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, you must be a fount of knowledge then. It's too bad we can't download your brain.
Very specialized though. There's still a
Yeah,
lot I don't know.
yeah. I don't know if you ever get all of it. There's so much detail. It's amazing.
There's so much to learn
And
out there, and I,
yeah. Oh, I know it. We should talk about one more thing. You said to me something about there's more than one record because of the different counties, and so you actually had to sort them into each county. Like, how do I ask that?
you mean like what I had like records wise, like in my Excel spreadsheet versus what was in the checklist? Like,
You did the checklist by county, so then if
yeah, I
you.
did it by county, but some counties show up like, okay, so I had the checklist in the Word document that I was working through, but I
Mhm,
also had all those all those records were also in an Excel spreadsheet. That's how it downloads out of GBIF.
mhm,
It's just an Excel spreadsheet. So you could have like if somebody went out and did like a collecting trip in say Lake Wenatchee, all those bees that they collected will be just like dumped in a spreadsheet in a list, and they may have caught like two or three individuals of one species. So you'll have multiple records for that one species in that one county, but it's only showing up once in the checklist. Is
okay.
that yeah? Because
And
it
then if
would
they cross the county line, then you got to put it in both counties.
it's only county level, so you could have like somebody collected in Wenatchee itself, and then over there in the forest nearby, and that would show up as in the checklist for that county. That would be two records for that county. If they're caught by different people, then you'll have two little super little notes on there showing that there were two different references, but you'll have multiple in the spreadsheet. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, it
Okay.
sounded like it was really complicated for you to
Yeah,
do that.
it was a lot and a lot of going back and forth and just a lot of data.
Yeah, and then yeah, decide all the references so everybody can go back and find them if they want to, right?
Yeah. Then yeah, the references and it was just it was a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And we're very glad that you did that for us because none of us would know what to do. And it's a gift to the state that the ag department pulled that all together for us. And we're kind of ahead of a lot of states out there, aren't we? This hasn't happened all across the U.S. yet.
There's still quite a few. There's only a few states that have the checklist out. I don't think even half the states have a checklist.
Yeah,
So
so good for us. Well, thank you for digging all these things up and sorting them all out. I'm sure we can answer some questions for people, so we'll do our best and we can send them off to you.
you're
And
welcome to forward them on to
everybody.
me if there's not if you guys can't answer them.
Yeah. good to have you
You're
on.
welcome.
So thank you for doing this. And finally, I'm really glad we finally got this recorded so we can have it on YouTube for everybody.
And thank you for letting me pre-record this.
You're welcome. Okay, take care. Thanks.
Right.
Bye.